Good morning, everyone. So today is the episode 9. So this episode is going to be talking about the AsIAm service in Ireland. AsIAm is an autism advocacy organization in the Republic of Ireland. So today I have a special guest called Adam Harris. He's the CEO of AsIAm, and he's our new T-Shop brothers too, Simon Harris.
Thank you for having me on the show, Adrian. It was a real pleasure to meet you a few weeks ago and to learn about your podcast. And I'm delighted to be able to appear and have this conversation with you today.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, can I ask what you're doing at the moment with AsIAM and stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously, I'm the founder and CEO of AsIAm. So I set it up 10 years ago based on my own experiences as an autistic person in Ireland. And we've grown over the last decade to become the national autism charity here in Ireland. We've around 30 on the team, and at any one time we try to have around half of our team being autistic, half of our board is autistic. The lived experience of what it means to be autistic is at the heart of everything that we do. I suppose in AsIAm, our vision is to bring about a society in which every autistic person is accepted as they are, equal, valued, and respected. And we do that both by providing supports to autistic people, like our autism information line, like our child and family support program, like our adult support and employment program. But critically, we also try and address autism as an accessibility issue. And we do work across the community in schools, in workplaces, in whole communities to give people the knowledge and skills they need to identify the often invisible barriers that autistic people face and to remove them. I suppose right now it's a very busy time because we're right in the middle of World Autism Month. So we're doing lots of events across the country. And we're running our Same Chance campaign, which is really all about educating the public about how in so many parts of our society, autistic people don't have the same chance, but that there's concrete measures they can take in order to give that chance.
Yeah.
So, Adrian, obviously you're running the podcast, but what are you getting up to yourself at the moment?
So you see, at the moment, I am in a PLC course at the moment. So for the past 3 years, I study applied psychology because like I'm autistic myself, and basically I want to be an autism advocacy for my career as one of my path. So I've been in the applied psycho. I've been in 3 years. I mean, this is my 4th years doing PLC now, but it's in psychology. But for the past 3 years, I did apply psychology and social studies, just to have some skills of how to talk about autism. And then this year, I'm doing Irish folklore study because, like, I'm interested learning some Irish history too. So it'll be. I mean, my goal is just to be in the PLC course, just studying different course and see where would I like to go for my future. and then for and then because basically I'm autistic myself, so I was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3 with this thing called PDDNOS, which is pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specific. So due to my special need, I have a delayed development. I wasn't speaking until the age of 5, and all my other development is kind of like 5 years behind my peers. But at the same time, I have other issues like OCD, anxiety disorder, compulsive and ritualized repetitive behavior, obsession, and sometimes emotional issues and other mental health issues, things. And it's been a really, but I do enjoy being autistic because that's just like, it's part of my disability because like I'm going to be like that forever. And at the same time, I know there are different difficulties, but that's because I'm disabled. And I have a special interest in Disney characters and costume characters, things like that.
What do you think are the main strengths that go with being autistic from your perspective?
So I think it's with their special interests that when they like something, they would be so good at something in a way that they can they can go into deeper. For instance, if I give you an example, there are some historical figures that were believed to be autistic, but you see, because they were high functioning. So back then, if you were autistic, you'll be described as someone who is severely autistic or someone who has a severely mental disorder. But these people, they were like high functioning. So, for instance, there are some expert like Amadeus Mozart from Austria. He was a musician, but he was believed to be autistic due to some of his behavior, social integration. But because he loved the classical music so much, he's so obsessed, and now he's the worldwide famous classical music composer. That every time when we talk about classical music, his face will show up. So I think that's one of the strengths of autistic people. And I think no matter how strange or how different you are, there are always unique around anyone. That's my belief.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose a lot of what you were sharing, I can relate to myself. I was diagnosed as being autistic when I was around 5 years old. And while a majority of autistic people in Ireland now attend mainstream school, either in the same class as everybody else or in an autism class, when I was younger, it was very much the norm that if you were autistic, you were segregated within the education system. So I spent the first 3 years of my education in a special school. Thankfully, the system began to change, and when I was 8 years old, I moved to the same school as everybody else in my community. I had a special needs assistant in the classroom for 5 years, and from there, I was able to go to secondary school independently. I suppose in a lot of the advocacy work that I do, I have spoken a lot about growing up as an autistic person in Ireland. But what I've been trying to do more of in recent time is actually speak about the experiences as an autistic adult today. So, for example, as somebody who and out and about in the community, I stim a lot. That's how I self-regulate. It's not something I can control, but it's something very important. And for me, that looks like running on my tiptoes. For me, I have days where I can concentrate very well and days where I find concentration quite difficult. I've experienced burnout as an autistic adult, so I think it's important to, get across that just as you get older, even though some areas of life may become more manageable, it doesn't mean the challenges or barriers don't still exist.
Yeah, I agree with you because I know that when you have autism, I know that sometimes sometimes I mean once you're autistic forever, regardless of what age you are or what kind of person you are. And I think these problems can be happen at any age. And all we just do is just to understand, accept the differences, and maybe help them and try to be patient. I mean, that's what we always do. I mean, from my experience, I think because like sometimes people do see autism as something that only children would have or adults will grow up, but that's completely wrong. Because like autism is a forever disability. So once you're autistic forever. And even though you were born as non-autistic, you cannot develop it later in your life. It's all lifelong disability. And at the same time, everyone is at a different level. Like some people may suit to go to special school, while some people may suit to go to mainstream school and get supported there. Like from my experience, I never went to a special school. I was in mainstream school all of my life. Although I have some difficulties, like in terms of bullying or something, I might feel like I'm treated unfairly, or people may not know like why I do that and think that it's just inappropriate, which is not the case. So yeah, so Adam, can I ask you about what is the work of AsIAm and what's the history about it, and maybe what are your goals?
Yeah, so I suppose to start with the history of it, because we've just celebrated our 10th birthday as an autism charity. And I suppose how it started was not in the office building that we're sitting in today, but very much in my own bedroom. So when I was a teenager, I began to blog about my experiences as an autistic person. And I remember distinctly one particular blog I wrote, really the first one I ever wrote. And I said that in Ireland, if people know that you're autistic, they speak to you like you're ET. And by that I meant they saw you as an alien figure. They were aloof with you. They felt they had to behave really differently around you. They made assumptions about what your support needs were. And I suppose I wanted to change that because coming from a family where we always talked about autism openly in our home and we talked about it in a positive way in the context of the time, But even though that was the case, by the time I was a teenager, I hated people knowing that I was autistic. I felt a huge stigma. I felt very different in a negative way. And I suppose I was frustrated by that. I found periods of time in secondary school quite challenging. And that was why I began to write and why I set up AsIAm. And, what I began to really notice was the things that I were finding difficult, the issues that I felt were important, the public need to understand more about, weren't really part of the mainstream narrative around autism. And indeed, while there was often a lot of discussion of autism in the media, it was talking about autistic people as opposed to listening to autistic people. So when I wrote that blog, it went viral on social media, and I ultimately was asked to appear on the Late Late Show to talk about the issue. And right across the country, so many families got in touch saying, this is my experience as well, we need to change attitudes. So at the time, I was only young. I think I was about 17, turning 18. And obviously, I didn't know how to set up a charity or a company or any of those sort of things. But luckily, a group of parents of autistic children came around me at the time, and we established AsIAm. We formally launched 10 years ago in 2014. And I suppose I could have never imagined back then that we would be doing the level of work and activity that we're doing now. I've always seen our work as a bridge building exercise, that it's about building capacity within our community. If people are to be included within society, people need to have the support to be able to engage. And that's why we do things like our autism information line, which, has had 7,500 callers since we opened in 2021. It's why we do things like our child and family support program, where I think about 3,500 families are registered and accessing post-diagnosis support groups, social groups, well-being activities. And we have a very similar program for autistic adults that also includes supporting people into the world of work. But that's only one half of what we do, because even if we support autistic people, even if we build capacity, we still live in a world that isn't built with autistic people in mind. When we would have started this advocacy work 10 years ago, it was estimated that 1 in 100 people in Ireland are autistic. And our understanding has changed so much over the last 10 years that we now know that 1 in 27 children of school-going age have an autism diagnosis. So this is a mainstream part of Irish society that people need to understand and to plan for in every aspect of our community. So, we've developed some really interesting initiatives over the last 10 years. We created the world's first autism-friendly university at DCU. We've developed autism-friendly shopping and rolled that out with some of the big supermarkets and shops across the country. Really excitingly, we developed a program for whole communities to become autism-friendly. That started in the small West Cork town of Clonakilty in 2018. We're now working with communities right across the country, and that includes Dublin City, which is making a bid to become the world's first autism-friendly capital city. So I think there's been a lot achieved, but it's really only scratching the surface, because in terms of when I know that our work will be done, it'll be unremarkable for autistic people to have the same chance. And we know that's not the case at the moment. Every World Autism Month, we publish the same chance report, and that documents the experiences of autistic people across the country and across the life cycle, and also includes an attitudes to autism poll. And if you look at this year's report, huge barriers to accessing education, to accessing health services, to accessing the community. But what's really interesting, I think, is actually the public attitudes. People have never been more aware. 80% of people, in fact, over 80% have heard of autism as a diagnosis. Most of us say we know someone who's autistic. Many of us say someone in our family is autistic. But this year, what we did was we described day-to-day social interactions, and we didn't mention autism. So we said things like, would you be comfortable having a conversation with somebody who doesn't like to make eye contact? How would you feel if there was somebody who was in the cinema or in the theatre and found it difficult to sit still? What would you do if you had a colleague in work who said they needed you to email them instead of speak to them? And it showed the Irish public weren't able to attach their awareness to these day-to-day interactions. And that's where these small changes that people can make such a difference to autistic people's lives. So that's what we want to change over the next 10 years. We also made a very exciting announcement to mark our 10th birthday last week, which is that we're going to open a number of one-stop shops across the country for autistic people. One in the East Coast here in Dublin, and one in the West Coast in Galway. And these are essentially going to be barrier-free community centres in which autistic people and families can come, can get guidance, can get support, and can access support groups. So we're really excited to open those between now and the end of the year.
Yeah, Thank you, Adam. That's really interesting, though, because from my opinion, I think that the public attitude and the society is really the one who needs to change and adapt. Because as we know, autism is a forever disability, and we cannot really change. So it's more really the society needs to change for us, not really change for the society. Because like if we have to change for the society, there are often a burden in the society because the thing is, like, it's our disability. That's just saying, like, if someone is on a wheelchair and they don't have a leg, and if imagine if you say no, they have to change for the society by force them to walk even they don't have a leg, and and then once they have a wheelchair, you call them like inappropriate. They're causing a lot of attention. That isn't the right attitude, and I think it's wrong. And it's the same concept with the autistic people.
And I suppose, Adrian, how do you think society needs to adapt to support autistic people?
Well, here's the thing. If I have to speak about for Ireland, in Ireland, I know that they do talk about a lot about the inclusion, like no matter you're autistic or not, you still have the same right like others. But sometimes I don't think that's right. Because first of all, autism is a disability and they should treat a bit different. What I mean treat a different is that they need to be treated different in a way that they need to say, for example, for those who have behavioral issues, they might need different boundaries though, just like already they do with kids. Like sometime in some society they know that sometimes kids cannot behave in a certain way adult does, so they have more kind of the different boundaries for them. And I think it should be the same for autistic people, as they're vulnerable people no matter what age they are, and they're always autistic. And the other thing is that sometimes not every society can accept their difference though. Like they say they will kind of include them, treat them like others, but then because of that they don't meet other people's expectation, then they get a bit discriminated where they're not allowed to be themselves, or they might get in trouble for being themselves, or having the society to like judge them as inappropriate or kind of exclude them out. And I don't think that is the right things to do, because like you need to treat them different though. Like give like accept the way they are. For example, if they were like behaving strange in the public, that's just mean like they're autistic and that's their strange wheelchair, which you just have to let it be. Because like when they behave strange, there's something behind. Maybe it could be their coping mechanism, or it could be something like they're trying to do to help. Like it may look strange, but it's just that it's part of their disability, and you cannot really change that. And the other thing is that I think in the Irish society, people often talk about autism just for children. Like, imagine if you were in crash primary school, there were a whole lot of support for them. And when they go into the society, no matter how strange they are, people can say things like, oh, they're just kids, just let them be. But as they get older, then they don't get that, and I don't think that's right. Because people don't see that autism is a forever disability. They just think that ev- they just think that it's one of a child things and they can grow out of, which is not true. Like, and at the same, like, they have to be, like, they have, like, autism is a forever disability. You cannot really change that. And the only way to change it is the society attitude. And then, say, when they get older, they need more support, and at the same time, just don't change them, just let the way they are. Because the thing is the society always just, because I think the society do need to accept autistic adult too, not just autistic children, both autistic adult and children. And I think the society should just see, like, no matter what age you are, they should just treat the autistic adult based on the needs. Like, for example, I've seen this in other country where they're successful, like in Germany. I've seen some mental disorder people, when they're like adult, they could have other mental disorder. But I've seen them like when they go out into the society, they could be like in like they still have problems like need to suck dummy, things like that, and they even have an adult dummy for these adult who needs them. And I think that's really good, and I think it should be like that in Ireland sometimes. And in terms of support service, Because from my experience now, unfortunately, that's the thing. When you are over 18, there are not much service for them. Not unless you're someone who is very severely autistic, cannot speak, then they do have day center, residential home, and everything's there for them, and they get all the social protection. But like when you're high functioning, not everyone gets them. And it's kind of sad that when they're high functioning, because they're known as capable, so the society expect that they're capable of everything, which is not true. Like some can be high functioning, like me. I don't consider myself as that high functioning as I have other difficulties in my life. But of course, when I go outside, people will see me that I'm very intelligent, very bright, but people doesn't know that inside I could have other challenges. And I think that what the society have to look into. That once you're autistic, no matter where you are, there always have to be support. And I think it would be great that if there's always a support for if there's always other supports like day center or residential home, even just for those adults who may just have autism, may not be severe or high functioning like me, but maybe if there's like residential home, day center, and everything. And at the same time, I think when it's come to criminal justice and stuff, I think the law does need to recognize autism is also a vulnerable member of the society, just like the way young people does. And I think that it would be great if they can change about, for example, maybe set different boundaries for those who has autism, just like the way with some children at a specific young age, like under 12 already. Like, I think I think the law have to recognize autism too and recognize that it's a disability. They have other challenges, so maybe set different boundaries. And at the same time, I think the school attitude has to change, which I saw some mainstream school already progressive, that they can have mainstream school and special school together. So what that means is sometimes these kids they can join the mainstream school to do some stuff, and if they want to do the special school, they go to the special class unit, like the school I volunteer in before. And I think in some and then in the school sometimes they adapt the learning and adapt the way they are. For instance, from my experience, I went to the secondary school, although it's a private secondary school, but in that secondary school there weren't that any autistic student. It was just all like non-autistic or normal student or non-mental disorder. But I'm lucky to have an SNA and some subject teachers that were so helpful that in a way they adapt my world. Like if I need, like for example, I carry my Disney figurines or other figurines to help. And even though I'm at my old age, teacher would never mind. They just let me to carry on because like I'm not disrupting the class. That's part of my needs. They adapt my learning, and like if I have anxiety, sometimes the SNA may bring me out for a walk, and I think that's the way it should be. But you see, not every school is doing that, and that's what you need to look at. So that's my opinion.
I think that's really important, and I agree with so much of what you've said. I mean, I too had an SNA, and I know the massive difference they can make just in terms of helping you stay regulated throughout the day, getting that understanding in school. I think it's really important to have those sort of strong relationships, that we sometimes say the impact one good adult can make, and I think that's particularly important for those of us who are autistic. I agree with you. I think there's a huge issue around making school university inclusive. Inclusion isn't just the permission to go into a school building or the permission to go into the classroom. It's having the same chance to learn in that classroom as a neurotypical young person or student. And I think one of the problems we see around the country is we've some schools that do inclusion very well, and we've some schools that seem to opt out. School culture is so important. And it is concerning that even today there's no mandatory training in autism for teachers. It's very hard to know how you can meet the needs of an autistic learner if you don't understand autism. There's an old adage that to teach me first you have to reach me, and I think that still sometimes doesn't happen within our system. One of the things we do within AsIAm is an autism friendly schools program where we support schools to reflect on their own practice, to identify the areas they're doing well, but also the areas they could improve, and showing them how. And that includes providing training to everybody who works within the school. So that's an important project that we do. I think it's great to hear you talk about the criminal justice system, because there's no doubt that autistic interactions can be misunderstood in public places. Indeed, we also know there's many reasons that autistic people are more likely to be the victim of crime than non-autistic people, particularly mate crime, where people take advantage and make you think that you're their friend, but actually they actually can be very cruel or unkind. So I think it's really important that the police service get the training they need. It's also unfortunate that in the last number of years we've seen more inquiries from places like the probation service, the court service, and indeed the prison service. And I think that's a real failure, because very often when that happens, it's because people have been failed growing up. They haven't received the support that they needed. I think we really, really need to change that. And I think what that shows is just one example of an issue is, I think, the need for us to think about autism not just in the context of services, but actually, the disability community up to a few years ago had that famous phrase, nothing about us without us. But now it's actually been simplified to nothing without us, because there's no aspect to public policy that doesn't need to consider the needs of autistic and disabled people. I think that's really important. Obviously, employment, you spoke about autistic adults. The one-stop shops I mentioned are going to be there for autistic adults, and this year we have career clinics that are going to support 400 autistic people across the country, because we need to realise that you're an adult for a lot longer than you're a child. And as you say, while people think about autism in the context of childhood, we've a lot of work to do to make the adult world more inclusive. We've such a high rate of unemployment in our community, and that's obviously horrible for individuals, but it's actually horrible for society that we're losing this talent and skill and perspective. And that really needs to change. If we have a situation where 1 in 27 children in school have an autism diagnosis, 1 in 27 children in school are going to expect to have the same chance to get a job when they leave school. So I think there's an awful lot of work us adults need to do now, to end this issue and to make sure that those in school today do have the same chance when they age out of school. So one of the things that we've been campaigning for in AsIAm for a long time is a national autism strategy. Other countries have this, indeed Northern Ireland has it, and we don't. And while we do have a national disability strategy, and that's important, there's some challenges like the ones we're talking about that are quite specific to our community and need specific care and attention. So I know that the government has promised to publish the national autism strategy in the next number of weeks. So we're waiting eagerly to see what that says. And for me, I think it's really important that it prioritises or puts a focus on autistic adults in areas where there hasn't been support before, like people in the community, as you mentioned. And I think it also needs to really prioritise ensuring everybody within society has access to the information that they need around autism, so we can become more inclusive.
Yeah.
So I suppose, Adrian, from your perspective and experience, what do you think Ireland does well on when it comes to autism, and where do you think we need to improve?
Well, here's a huge improvement that I've seen so far. So, improvement, I can see that in some public service, they already recognize autism as a disability. So that's like if they need to access to a public toilet, that they don't like the noisy crowd, and or maybe someone like me, because I have OCD and I might be a bit clumsy in the toilet. So I think the disabled toilet may suit me, so I can use the disabled toilet, while others use the main one. And I have the autism ID card, which AsIAm has provided to me, and that's great. It's great that they provide ID card for autistic people, so that's like if they're in the public and they need help or need to use a facility, the card could explain everything. It's well, of course, I do think it's a good label though, because like if they have this label, then people would see and understand. Because when you don't have this label, people wouldn't understand. I mean, I have a few situations where when I need to use the public toilet, I wait at the disabled toilet. Some people don't know why I'm waiting there, but I just explain that I'm autistic. I can be very anxious to be in the toilet with other people, so I prefer to use the disabled toilet. Then that way people will say, "All right, I understand," and It's a great way that Ireland has improved, and sometimes it's great way the way how they have the free public travel, so that way, because like not every autistic people can be employed, and at the same time not every autistic people are good at planning, or there could be other issues that can be barrier from traveling. So it's great that the way they have the free public traveling for the disabled people, include the autistic people, so that include like going anywhere with the carer. Because actually, from my point of view, sometimes like me, I like traveling around sometimes. is a great way to get to re- reduce anxiety or other things, and that's my special interest. So in a way, it's much easier when I get the free travel, that my carer goes free, I get free travel under HSE, and the HSE kind of pay for it, and I think that's a great way. And the other great things is that sometimes when you're in any facilities like hospital or when you go into any entertainment area, you get a discount based on your special need or even your carer, so that way they can have more fun. And it's a great way to reduce anxiety and let them to engage with their world. That's really important, I think. And also, I would like to mention that when I was in Kilkenny is actually a great example of how they facilitate the autistic people. For example, they have an autism-friendly car park where they have their own space while get parked there. Kilkenny does have the Kilkenny does have some of the shops that saying that after 9 they want to be quiet, so in a
Mm.
way it's autism friendly. And the other experience I want to share is that when I was in now, of course, Ireland don't have Disneyland, but I've been to Disneyland in other like Paris, Tokyo, and I think what they're doing great is that because not every autistic people are good at waiting along the
Mm.
line. So like when there is a long queue for anything, you get the autistic free pass card, which is like a fast pass to reduce the waiting time, and that way you don't have to wait in the line and can do other things while waiting for the attraction or characters photos and hugs for a bit. Then what you do is that you show them your ID card. They give you the fast pass card. Then then you get to like sometimes free pass the line, or maybe it might reduce the waiting time. And then when you use the card, like me, I have a special interest in costume characters. Costume characters are like the characters in theme parks where people dress up as them so they come out to be real. And the reason I love them as a special interest because I like the way they're so cute and I love the touch of them. It's just like when people love animals, they love to touch the animals. So I go to Disneyland every once a year to hug and pictures with the characters. That's the thing I'd always do in Disneyland to get all the characters' photos. And what is great is that if you have the autism card, the characters may treat you special. And in a way, I love that, and it kind of helps me a lot. And and I think, and then sometimes in Disneyland shows and stuff, they might have a special area for autistic people where it's not too crowded. So like in the parade, maybe if they were in a area that are just designated for disabled people, then when the characters and the show come out, they might have more time to entertain you and focus on you. It's kind of like person centered because I'm more kind of like to be person centered in a way that's kind of help. So I think Ireland is doing something like that in some way and in some places, and I think that's really great. But for the improvement, I think the big improvement is the surface, because unfortunately when it's coming to some other facilities surface, they're not there still need to be there still need to be a lot to do. For example, after turning 18 they treat them as adult, but I think they should have more they shouldn't but I think they shouldn't be doing that. Like, first of all, in modern, like a lot of the modern psychologists already confirmed that even though you turn 18, but biologically you are still a teenager or adolescent, not until like you're in your late 20s, like 26 or 20 something. So I think for autistic people, when they're like using the young people service or being in a youth club, I think it would be great that if they allow them to stay on not until like in the late 20s. Like, even though they say they're over at a specific age, but maybe give exception for them. Because like I have a friend who's autistic. Now he's severely autistic now. He might have an intelligence of a 6 years old. He's like in his late 20s. But in the church he would still allow to go to the kids Sunday school because that will suit his level though, even though he's older and there are other kids, but he still go to the Sunday school and have fun like other kids, and I think that's the way it should be. And because like we autistic people, we are very vulnerable. Some like we're still vulnerable like young people sometimes. So sometimes a youth club would be great for us. And at the same time, because like for some autistic people, they might they might have friends with either younger people or older people. Due to that, they cannot interact with the peers. So if there's some club that like say is for someone under a specific age, but if they make exception for that autistic people to stay on, then they can interact with the kids or maybe with the people that they want to interact with. Or I think the other improvement is that first of all, I don't think they should just cut off the service at 18. They should like continue to have service. Well, for the autistic people, the service have to be there forever though. That's 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 a must, I think. Because if there's no service that going on, because like that's their life disability and they need those service in order to live on and stuff. So I think the service they need has to be there forever. That's include like day center, residential home, doesn't matter where they are, it should be available for them too. Because like autism is a wide spectrum, they can have all other difficulties and they're just the same difficulties, and sometimes they cannot be like just because they're high functioning they shouldn't be expected like others. Because like me, I'm not that high functioning, but I still have lots of struggle, and I think people does need to see that. And at the same time, I think criminal justice should also change, where if they set different boundaries for autistic people in a way that it's a bit like an excuse or for maybe something that is related to their difficulties and stuff. Like I think if the criminal justice can see them as vulnerable just like they do with kids, I think that would be great too. So I think within this area that has to be changed, which in some country they did. Now I do understand that each country has different law, but sometimes Ireland could model the great way approach sometimes. Because I know that we're somewhere in the middle in terms of like countries of how we see autism and stuff. But it would be great that if Ireland can try to learn some positive way too.
I agree with so much of what you've said, and I think one of the things that I think is really interesting is we spoke about accessibility and some of the initiatives in places like Disneyland and in shops. I think the big thing we need to get to over the next number of years is away from where they're kind of nice examples towards the fact that they become the norm wherever we go. One of the things that I think is really interesting about autism and autism policy is what we understand as good practice this year might be totally different in 2 years' time. It's such a rapidly developing area. So even I think, things like autism friendly shopping time is still important, but I think now we're beginning to say things like, but actually why should shops not be accessible all of the time? What are measures that could be put in place throughout the day that would make the experience easier? And I think that's really important as well. I think for me, there's so much work to be done around. I think if we can change attitudes, so many barriers disappear. For me, judgment and attitude in the same chance report was identified next only to services as the single biggest barrier for many autistic people. And I think what's really key in that regard is educating people from a younger age. I often say that we've mainstreamed people in Ireland, but done it in an Irish way, which without having a proper conversation, a proper public education around it. There is a review of the primary school curriculum commencing, and we're saying that every child should learn about neurodivergence and neurodiversity as part of their education, as they learn about other forms of diversity within the community. And I think then what we need to see is an elevator approach to that knowledge, that if you're a police officer, you might need a specific level of training. If you're someone who works in a shop, you might need a different level of training, but that everybody should have access to that knowledge. I think in terms of services, there's so much work to do, because I think they're very clearly broken. And indeed, in this year's Same Chance report, a majority of people access their assessment privately, even though people have a right to public assessment. Over half were on waiting lists, and many people on the waiting list were on for over 4 years. And that just adds so much stress and issues to families. Of course, we need to see more investment, but investment doesn't solve everything. We're not training enough therapists, we're not retaining enough therapists, but also the very model of support that we're offering to people is based on a time where maybe one in several hundred people had an autism diagnosis. The system isn't built to accommodate the number of people who now need to support it. It's not built in a dynamic enough way to recognise, as you say, the challenges people face across the life cycle. So I think there's a huge amount of work to be done there. I think we are one of the weakest in Europe in this, and I think what we do need to see is at the minute in Ireland you only have a right to assessment, you've no right to services, and that's quite unusual for a European country. So I do think the Disability Act that was passed in 2005, the Education of Persons with Special Education Needs Act that was passed in 2004, neither have been fully commenced. Both, if they were people, would be adults now. And I know that the Epson Act is being reviewed, but we need to see the Disability Act reviewed in the next DAL. And we need to make sure that it creates not just a right to assessment, but a right to services as well.
And at the same time, I want to add the last point I forgot to add. I think that sometimes for those autistic people, because different of them could develop differently. Like some of them, they could be just, they could have a mind of a child, although they could be in an adult body. But the thing is that they've been just look like other adult though. But I think in that way, I think it would be great that if the society just kind of like the way how they can be very patient and accepting the kids. I think it would be great if they do the same to the autistic adult. For instance, here's the case I want to share. Some autistic adult would still enjoy playground the way other kids does. But in some playground they have the policy that you have to be under a specific age to go in. But sometimes I do see them that for some autistic adult, they still enjoy the playground, and when they say they have autism and they still enjoy the playground, they might let them in and just enjoy the way other kids does. I think that's the way it should be. And I think that if they can accept that, that would be great. So like sometimes you have to look at situations though. Like if those autistic adult who love playground, and if they want to go on the swing or the slide in the playground and they say they have autism, then they should be allowed though. And I think that's a great way to change too.
Absolutely. Adrian, it's been such a pleasure talking to you today.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to talk to you. And also, I want to congratulate you again with Simon Harris that he is the new Taoiseach. And I'm hoping that he heard this podcast and maybe he can bring a change to the Republic of Ireland on how we can treat autistic people.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
I think we all hope that will happen.
Yeah, and
thank you so much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Cheers.
That was great,